The Hundred Years' War, which spanned from 1337 to 1453, was not a single, continuous war, but a series of conflicts, battles, and political maneuvers that redefined the course of European history. It was primarily fought between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of France, with a tangled web of alliances that drew in other powers such as Burgundy, Scotland, and even the Holy Roman Empire. The conflict's roots lay deep in questions of feudal rights, territorial claims, and the balance of power within Western Europe, but its implications reached far beyond the battlefield. The war altered the nature of warfare, introduced lasting political changes, and set the stage for the rise of nation-states in Europe. To fully appreciate the Hundred Years' War, one must delve into the intricacies of medieval feudalism, dynastic claims, and the changing role of chivalric values. This narrative aims to not only recount the key events of the war, but also explain the underlying motivations and consequences that shaped the world in its aftermath. The seeds of conflict, dynastic rivalry, and feudal ambitions. The war's origins lie in the complex feudal relationships and dynastic rivalries that defined medieval Europe. At the heart of the conflict was a bitter dispute over the French throne. In 1328, the Capetian dynasty, which had ruled France for over 3 centuries, ended with the death of King Charles VI, who left no male heir. According to French law, women could not inherit the throne, nor could their children. This exclusion of women, known as the Salic law, meant that Charles VI's closest male relative was his cousin, Philip of Valois, who became King Philip VI. However, Edward III of England, the son of Isabella of France, the daughter of King Philip IV of France and sister to the deceased Charles IV, also laid claim to the French throne. He argued that, through his mother, he had a legitimate claim, making him a more direct heir. Though the French nobility rejected his claim in favor of Philip VI, this decision set the stage for a prolonged struggle, as Edward would not relinquish his belief in his right to the crown. The early phase, Edwardian War. The first phase of the war is often referred to as the Edwardian War. It began in 1337 when Edward III formally declared himself King of France, sparking open hostilities. The early years of the war were characterized by intermittent skirmishes and raids rather than large-scale engagements. Nevertheless, several pivotal battles shaped the conflict's early years. The Battle of Sluys. One of the earliest and most decisive confrontations was the naval Battle of Sluys in 1340. Edward needed to establish control of the English Channel to facilitate his campaigns in France, and this battle gave him the opportunity. The French fleet, under the command of Admiral Hugues Quiret, was positioned at the entrance to the port of Sluys, modern-day Sluis, Netherlands. Edward's fleet, equipped with longbows and commanded with remarkable skill, launched a surprise attack, overwhelming the French ships. The English victory at Sluys had far-reaching consequences. It not only ensured English control of the seas, but also effectively neutralized the French naval threat for the rest of the war. This allowed Edward to transport troops and supplies across the Channel without hindrance, laying the groundwork for his subsequent land campaigns. The Battle of Crécy. The next major engagement was the Battle of Crécy in 1346. Edward's forces, though heavily outnumbered, employed a revolutionary tactic that would become a hallmark of English warfare: the use of the longbow. The longbowmen, positioned on high ground, unleashed a deadly hail of arrows that decimated the charging French cavalry. Crécy was significant not only for its tactical brilliance, but also for the way it exposed the limitations of the traditional chivalric warfare practiced by the French. The battle demonstrated the effectiveness of disciplined infantry and long-range weaponry over massed cavalry charges, altering the course of medieval military strategy. Following the victory at Crécy, Edward laid siege to the city of Calais, which fell in 1347. The capture of Calais was a strategic triumph, providing the English with a valuable foothold on French soil that would remain in their hands for over 2 centuries. The Black Death and a temporary lull. The war's momentum was interrupted by the outbreak of the Black Death in 1348, a catastrophic plague that swept through Europe, killing nearly half of its population. Both England and France were devastated by the disease, leading to a temporary cessation of hostilities. The plague's impact on the economy and society was profound, weakening feudal structures and sowing the seeds for social upheavals that would influence the later stages of the war. The War of the Two Peters and the Treaty of Brétigny. When hostilities resumed, one of the most dramatic chapters unfolded with the Battle of Poitiers in 1356. Edward, the Black Prince, led the English forces in a campaign through southwestern France, clashing with King John II of France. At Poitiers, the English once again utilized their longbows and defensive positions to devastating effect, capturing King John II and much of the French nobility. The capture of the French king created a power vacuum and internal instability in France. To secure John's release and bring a temporary end to the conflict, the Treaty of Brétigny was signed in 1360. Under the terms of the treaty, Edward relinquished his claim to the French throne, but gained significant territories, including Aquitaine, in full sovereignty. The treaty marked the end of the first phase of the Hundred Years' War, though it was more of a truce than a lasting peace. The Caroline War. The uneasy peace established by the Treaty of Brétigny did not last. Hostilities flared again in 1369, in what is known as the Caroline War, named after the French king Charles V, also known as Charles the Wise, who ascended to the throne in 1364. Charles V was determined to reclaim the territories lost to England and employed a strategy of attrition rather than direct confrontation. Bertrand du Guesclin and guerrilla warfare. Charles V's most effective commander was Bertrand du Guesclin, a skilled tactician who employed guerrilla warfare to great effect. Du Guesclin avoided pitched battles and instead focused on small-scale raids, ambushes and sieges, gradually wearing down the English forces. His strategy proved highly successful, and by the 1370s, much of the territory ceded at Brétigny had been recaptured. The Caroline War demonstrated a shift in the nature of warfare, moving away from chivalric ideals and towards a more pragmatic approach that prioritized strategic gains over honor. However, the war ground to a halt in the 1380s as both countries faced internal difficulties. England was mired in political turmoil under the young Richard II, and France struggled with economic hardships and peasant revolts. The Lancastrian War. The final and most decisive phase of the Hundred Years' War began in 1415 under King Henry V of England, a dynamic and ambitious monarch determined to revive English claims in France. Henry's invasion marked the start of the Lancastrian War, named after the ruling house of Lancaster to which he belonged. The Battle of Agincourt. One of the most iconic battles of the war occurred in 1415 at Agincourt. Henry's army, exhausted and heavily outnumbered, found itself facing a much larger French force. Nevertheless, employing tactics similar to those at Crécy and Poitiers, the English longbowmen decimated the French knights, whose heavy armor and muddy battlefield conditions made them easy targets. The victory at Agincourt was a turning point in the war. It cemented Henry's reputation as a military genius and gave England a renewed sense of confidence. Following the battle, Henry embarked on a campaign of conquest, gradually expanding English control over northern France. The Treaty of Troyes. Henry's most significant diplomatic achievement was the Treaty of Troyes in 1420. Under the terms of the treaty, Henry married Catherine of Valois, the daughter of King Charles VI of France, and was recognized as the heir to the French throne. This agreement effectively disinherited Charles VI's son, the future Charles VII, and set the stage for the eventual unification of the English and French crowns. However, Henry V's premature death in 1422 left his infant son, Henry VI, as king of both England and France, a situation that quickly unraveled. The French rallied around Charles VII, who, with the support of key figures like Joan of Arc, reversed the tide of the war. Joan of Arc and the turning point. Joan of Arc, a young peasant woman claiming divine guidance, emerged as a pivotal figure in the later stages of the war. In 1429, she convinced Charles VII to let her lead an army to lift the siege of Orléans, a critical stronghold besieged by the English. Her leadership and charisma galvanized the French troops, and the English were forced to retreat. Joan's success at Orléans marked a dramatic shift in French fortunes. She continued to inspire French victories, culminating in the coronation of Charles VII at Reims Cathedral. Although Joan was captured by the Burgundians in 1430 and handed over to the English, who executed her for heresy, her impact was profound. She became a symbol of French resistance and unity, and her martyrdom further rallied support for the French cause. The Endgame, the fall of English France. The final years of the war were marked by the gradual erosion of English holdings in France. The turning point came in 1435 with the Treaty of Arras, in which the Duke of Burgundy, previously an English ally, switched sides to support Charles VII. This diplomatic coup isolated the English and shifted the balance of power decisively in favor of the French. Over the next 2 decades, French forces systematically recaptured English-held territories, culminating in the decisive Battle of Castillon in 1453. The battle saw the effective use of artillery, which signaled the end of the era of medieval knights and castles and the beginning of modern warfare. The English defeat at Castillon marked the end of the 100 Years' War, leaving Calais as England's sole possession in France. Consequences and legacy. The 100 Years' War had profound and lasting effects on both England and France. For France, it marked the end of feudal fragmentation and the rise of a centralized monarchy under Charles VII. The war also fostered a sense of national identity and pride, with figures like Joan of Arc becoming national icons. In England, the war drained the treasury and contributed to political instability. The loss of French territories undermined the prestige of the English monarchy, setting the stage for internal conflicts such as the Wars of the Roses. Militarily, the war saw the decline of the knight and the rise of professional armies and new technologies like gunpowder, which would reshape European warfare in the centuries to come. Conclusion. The 100 Years' War was far more than a series of battles. It was a transformative period that shaped the political and cultural landscape of Europe. It was a time of shifting alliances, evolving military tactics, and profound social changes. As both England and France emerged from the conflict, they did so as fundamentally different entities, laying the groundwork for the modern nations we recognize today. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your wisdom and knowledge in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.